Hello, everybody. This is me, Prakhar Sharma, your host at the Job Opportunities in Esports webinar series. We are here to bring you the second season of our pretty beloved webinar series from last year. And this is brought to you by Esports Gaming Ecosystem Project, this is also known as SK. You must be wondering what we do. So I would just give you a short intro about that. So from developing the regional know-how of esports to bringing together people about different skills and expertise in the field of gaming and esports, we do everything. And by an ecosystem, we mean that we create and promote member participation of various different activities in this area. We connect experts and companies in the industry, coach and support entrepreneurs in gaming, discover various business possibilities in esports, boost the cooperation in the area between all these different uh, stakeholders, and create a strong network of gaming enthusiasts who are always there when it comes to tournaments, events, and webinars like this. So for today's episode, we start season 2 on a very healthy note in this new year, and we have Violeta Ivanova. Hello, Violeta. It's good to have you with us. And we are going to talk about physical health in the field of gaming. Pretty interesting topic. So we're delighted to have you for that.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So I would give you the button for screen sharing, and you can tell us everything there is.
Right, I have a little presentation here for you guys. So let's see how that's going to work. I'm assuming you can see my screen already.
Yes, it is
great.
Like pretty visible.
Yes. So, hi, I'm Violeta. I'm a physiotherapist from Pori, Finland, and I studied at Satakunta University of Applied Sciences. And I will tell you a bit about what physios do. Why is it important that general health is taken care of? And what can physios do to help in the esports industry? As well as a little bit about my research that I published last December. So the general point would be, to no surprise to anyone, that general health and wellness are a must for everybody. I don't think there's much to be said about that, apart from just being healthy is a good thing to have, especially considering we live in a second year of pandemic. So it's way high on the list of good to have.
Yeah.
So when it comes to gaming, of course, it is a cognitive skill, but the physical training that you can do outside of gaming can help directly improve your performance when you are playing the game. So of course, there are benefits to practicing your skill of gaming while gaming, and scrims and aim labs and so on, but it also benefits to go a bit outside and to try and do some physical activity. As an example, traditional team sports can help build skills that can help you work within the esports environment, as most of esports is a team-based area. So playing team sports, you can build better communication. You can have a lot better relationship with your teammates, and all of these skills directly translate into how you play together as a team, whether it's going to be League of Legends or something else. That team dynamic and the communication that you learn through traditional sports, whether it's once a week, once a month, it is still, as long as you engage in it, can definitely help you in your game as well.
All right. Yeah, that's a pretty good beginning to the webinar that you gave. So I'm looking forward for it. Before we move on to the next subject, we had a short intro about you, and you mentioned that you are a physiotherapist yourself. But
Yes.
uh, we've had a conversation before, and I know that you're a gaming enthusiast as well, right? So I would just like to I ask it to all the guests that we have on this show, and I want to know like about your gamer profile. So what games do you first play, and since then, what is your favorite game, or like what are you playing these days? Do you play yourself?
Yeah, the I think as most people that got involved into esports, mine also
Uh
comes from just being a gamer.
huh.
Um, Also for starting with games, also pretty standard 90s kid. Got a Nintendo and started playing, and then it just continued. Um, as far as what I like to play myself, it is usually single player RPG games. I like to completely get lost in a world somewhere. I like a good story.
Uh huh.
The latest one I've been playing has been Disco Elysium, which is a
Oh,
very different kind of game.
I
I
love
never
that game.
thought I could ever have a conversation with my spinal cord telling me what alcohol consumption does to you, but if you like to read, as the game is 99% reading, it's fantastic. It's quite something special, I
It
think.
is. It is though. I agree. It's like a book for me, to be honest. Like it has so much in it, but not good choice, I would say.
Yeah, it's great. It's definitely something different, and that kind of goes into what I do enjoy playing myself. Like I do like to try different things.
uh,
But like a good RPG is kind of where I'm at.
it's something we have in common then.
Yeah. I have played as well multiplayer games. I have more hours in World of Warcraft and Diablo than I would ever admit to having.
Uh-huh.
That's as far as my competitiveness goes. But nowadays, I prefer the single player kind of more laid back experience.
And like everyone enjoys a good story.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think games are one of the mediums where you can really tell a great story. It's such a potential, and it's a lot more accessible to people than um, some books would be. So I love it.
So Violeta, I want to ask you, how did it get into physiotherapy? Like your interest from just playing games to like helping people who play games. How did it all start?
It didn't start from the point when I got to the university, and I think this is a good place to actually explain what a physiotherapist is, because most people would be wondering, like, you're a what kind of therapist again? What do you do? Massage, maybe. As the photos show, we kind of do a lot of all of that. We are focused on providing a treatment to people that is based on physical action. That means it's not medication necessarily. It has to do with physical action. It's typically exercise. We try to educate people on what can help them better. In some cases, we would do manual therapy as well, although nowadays that we're going further and further from it, especially during COVID.
Uh-huh.
Um, we would have a lot of paperwork to do as well.
Uh-huh.
But the main point is that we try to bring people back to the level that they want to be at. And
Okay.
uh, that was the main motivation to get into these kind of studies, because it's a very rewarding, personally rewarding profession, because
Mhm.
um, the whole personal fulfillment and everything. It's a very active profession, and you basically don't have many limits as to what you can do and what kind of therapy you can do. There is a lot of new technologies that you can incorporate, which is also what I like.
Mhm.
So trying to think outside of the box, trying to improvise, and just having a different day every day would be a great thing. Keeps your brain moving as
Mm-hmm.
well. As for gaming, that didn't come until like it wasn't something I was aiming for at first, but we had at some point some measurements with heart rate monitors that we had to wear for a couple of days. It was
Uh-huh.
first beat heart monitors, and during that time I was still raiding in WoW, and I noticed that while I was having the monitor, that um, you basically have to record a diary according to it, and then it matches your heart rate with the diary.
Okay.
So I noticed that during raid times, it showed that this is the type of cardio activity that you should be doing. Other
Mm-hmm.
similar activities would be cycling and running. So I thought, oh, okay, so there must be something into it. Because at that point, there wasn't really that much research involved into esports. So we didn't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I started to look more into it and thought, okay, could there be something else that we don't know about games?
Mm-hmm.
Because clearly it is showing activity. So I started to look more into it, and that's how I ended up to where I'm now.
That's a good story. Like that's kind of inspiring because as a gamer, you wanted to do something in the field that you, I would say, loved, and that's like the best thing one can do to do something that they are actually like they are interested in. So pretty impressive. And as I said before, I love learning through memes, and this is a good one.
Yeah, I think this is the best way to explain what physiotherapists actually do, because it is a very versatile profession. You can do the very standard working in a hospital ward,
Uh-huh.
but you can also be working for design companies and furniture companies,
Yeah.
mattress companies, people that build buildings to ensure accessibility and so on. So, um, or esports, for example, because that is not a field that has a lot of physiotherapists in
Yeah, true.
it. But this is a bit more kind of in a nicer way, saying that what is a physio. So we would work a lot in prevention, injury prevention, which is the area that I'm most interested in when it comes to esports, because there are currently no injury prevention methods. There's no steps taken to ensure that uh, symptoms don't develop further. So prevention is a big one. Treating injury if it happens, as well as diseases, disorders, and pretty much anything that a person can have a problem with that relates to physical or and sometimes mental
Uh-huh.
issues, because we are still therapists. Um, so the goal in everything is just to improve people's well-being and quality of life. That is what they want to achieve. We try to make sure that that happens.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another area is to ensure accessibility and ability to participate. That is done through adapting different sports
Mm-hmm.
to people who have disabilities, or adapting different kind of training to people with disabilities, working with assistive aids, and again, working towards trying to improve people's quality of life through any means necessary. And technology is a really big factor in this one. And of course, we follow evidence based practice. So that would mean that research plays a big factor. Of
Mm-hmm.
course, we can always try new things, but research is what we based our experience and practice on.
All right. I really like the point that you mentioned about preventing any injury that can be there because it's true. Like there are not so many prevention guidelines existing like in very conventional things, and then this gaming and esports is such a new concept for a field like health that we still don't have a lot of information about it. And what is better than preventing any problem at the first place? Like prevention is better than cure, so that's really nice and wholesome for gamers, I would say.
Yeah, we have the primary prevention, which is ideally what we want to do. We want to prevent any condition from actually developing.
Uh-huh.
But of course, we also have secondary prevention, which is basically what rehabilitation is. If a problem does happen, then how do we help through it, get back on point, and get back to the level that you want to be on, or that you were on previously? So that is kind of the field that we can really help with. We're not necessarily coaches, we're not mentors. We can be, but where we can really help is to work with those professionals that already manage the teams and the players, and really make sure that they know as well, and that there is an open dialogue going on.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yes. So then we have, I think this is just very general information of like esports, that it is a big industry, and there are a lot of traditional sports teams and traditional sports in general, like NHL, FIFA, F1, that during last year they really got involved into esports because everything else was canceled.
Yeah.
Um, so they also brought a lot of their own professionals that are specialized in their own field. They brought them to the esports area. So they're doing some really good stuff in there. Um, and of course, the the Among Us team building, and not necessarily in every case that it was a building a team. In some cases, it
Yeah.
might have been dividing a team, but
True.
it was a fun thing to do. We saw some concerts in VR. We saw board meetings done in Fortnite. There was also Marshmallow concert going on in Fortnite.
Yeah.
So games are a really good medium to do things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to do, whether it's time of pandemic or
Yeah.
just simply a worldwide event that other people would be very limited to going. You can definitely do that through games. We saw a lot of fundraising campaigns done, even from officials like the British Red Cross. And during the last year, the World Health Organization said that games are actually good for you, because they help your mental health, they help your communication with people. I would go as far as to say, depending on the game you play, because probably Fortnite and LoL are not going to help your communication. But generally, it can build team skills, or communication skills, leadership skills. Um, and of course, you get to meet your friends, which you wouldn't otherwise be able to meet, whether it's abroad or you're stuck in quarantine or something like that.
Yeah, like I was also reading this article last year when we were all stuck in the lockdown, and there was this WHO thing, and it almost felt like a win for like gaming in general, because for the first time, I think after like since the inception of gaming, first time an official body, and such a big body of UN, is speaking that it's actually not bad for your health. So that felt pretty good, and it was a good point to bring up, especially in this episode, because after all, like it's not just I would say entertainment hidden in this. There are games which are totally about therapy, and like I've played some really wholesome and really nice games which have helped me just to calm or just to chill sometimes. So that's I totally agree with like that, and I would take that win. Thanks
Yeah, of
WHO.
course. It helped my thesis as well, because I already had written the introduction on how games are bad for you, because there are indeed negative effects that need to be addressed. But the whole conversation is not just about the negatives, because there is a lot of positive going on as well,
True.
and it's necessary to mention it. So my introduction went very positively after I could include this. But yeah, it is definitely a market that has grown. It has probably won the most during the entire 2020.
Uh-huh.
Um, and I would certainly like to see it grow more because I enjoy everything there is about it. So I'd definitely like to see more on it. And speaking about the positives and negatives, and about my thesis, I can give a short overview on what I did and why I did that. Um, because this is, to this date, this is the first ever physical measurement of actual stress during gaming.
Uh-huh.
In this case, it is focused on the wrist, as I chose carpal tunnel syndrome. It was done in collaboration with Tikka eSports, who are local to me in Body, and it was done throughout the course of the last year and a half, maybe something like that.
Some of our audience might not be really knowing the term carpal tunnel syndrome. Can you explain it for them? It would be
Yes,
pretty
I will.
nice.
So, uh, I won't go too much into anatomy, but carpal tunnel syndrome is basically a neurological condition of the upper body. It affects the carpal tunnel, or this area of
The
your
wrist.
wrist. The typical symptoms that you can get are sensations of numbness in your hands, sensation of burning in your fingers. In some cases, it can be pain. It can be in your hands, wrist, anywhere along the forearm, elbow, or in some cases in the shoulder.
Okay.
So it is pretty common upper limb nerve entrapment.
Mhm.
Uh, and you can definitely treat it like it's not end of the world. Typically, it presents itself in both hands. So if you have the symptoms in one hand, you are more likely to have it in the other as well. Um, but it is very important to notice the early symptoms because, as I talked before on prevention, that is when you can do the primary prevention. Um, and I chose this topic because I am generally interested in neurology, but also it's quite common for gamers to say to game until your fingers are numb, or to have complaints about painful fingers and so on.
Mhm.
So I wanted to see if there's really anything to it. There's a lot of talk as well that working on a computer can give you carpal tunnel syndrome. I also wanted to see if that is true. And if it is indeed true, then how can we help with it? Because in any other carpal tunnel syndrome case,
Yeah.
there would be physiotherapy involved. In some cases, there would be surgery, but there wasn't anything specific on esports. So you would have a lot of use of your wrist. So I was just genuinely curious. Again, picking a topic that you really enjoy reading about, that's a pro tip when you want to write a thesis, because you will spend a lot of time reading about it.
Point
So
noted.
yeah, the contents of it were the related anatomy to carpal tunnel syndrome, different tests that physiotherapists would have to find out if it is really carpal tunnel syndrome. You would have different anatomical risk factors. For example, women are more likely to have it. Um, and of course, if you have smaller wrists or different kind of muscle composition, that would also be a factor. The bigger parts would be individual risk factors and occupational risk factors. In individual, you have things like diabetes that can increase the risk of carpal tunnel syndrome. And in occupational risk factors, which were the ones that I was most interested in, because there is a lot of research when it comes to office use and office work. But I don't think it's necessarily directly comparable to esports because, yes, you do use a mouse, a keyboard, you have a desk, you have a monitor, but the amount that you use them will be completely different as to what you would use something when working in an office, whether it's IT work, secretary work, or something else.
Mhm.
So I wanted to find out what's really the difference and whether or not that is a risk factor for esports players or gamers in general. So I focused on keyboard, different keyboards. Is it an office keyboard? Is it a gaming keyboard? There's different heights. Different mouse is also a factor. Home ergonomics, which most gamers have none of, because you can see some very funky ways of using a computer, which you don't see necessarily in an office environment.
Yeah.
And then I go into the treatment, focusing more on conservative methods, or conservative methods would be not surgical types of treatment. So that would involve a lot of physiotherapy, exercise, kinesiotaping, um, any kind of hot packs, cold packs, basically any kind of other treatments that don't involve surgery. And of course, I do touch a bit on the surgical intervention, which when it gets to a certain point that the symptoms are too severe, then surgery would be the only way to help with it. It's called a decompression surgery, and it
Uh-huh.
is very effective. But ideally, we want to get to the point where we can help and prevent entirely going to surgery, because it is possible, as long as people really understand the symptoms and there is an open dialogue between players and their coaches. Once
Mhm.
those symptoms appear, that they can be addressed, and then the player can move on and keep performing without needing to take time off for surgery.
Okay.
So I would very quickly go over it. Because there's just a lot of data. What I mentioned about ergonomics, this is not how you sit in an office
Yeah, true.
most of the time. But uh, again, it wasn't known before that. Is it a
Uh-huh.
risk factor? Is it not? So I wanted to try and find out as much as possible. So based on research, working on a computer desk is not a high risk profession for carpal tunnel syndrome. The high risk would be technically any kind of profession where you have a lot of short movement with your hands
Mhm.
and a lot of repetitive movement with your hands, because that is how you get the irritation in the wrist. You would need
Uh-huh.
to do a lot of repetitive movement. So the highest risk professions would be something like electronics assembly or food processing industries. But in traditional desk work, you don't really have that. You have a few clicks here and there, you have a bit of typing, but not
Yeah.
too bad. However, in esports, you use your mouse and keyboard a lot more.
Mhm.
So that's where I was thinking that would there be a differentiation between, yes, it's computer work, but it's a different kind of use of the same kind of hardware. Um,
Uh-huh.
so that's why it got me thinking that, okay, we need specific research, because using the office research is not applicable necessarily to carpal tunnel syndrome in esports. So on the photo here, you would see a splint. This is the most common thing that it would be prescribed to somebody who has a carpal tunnel syndrome.
Mhm.
It basically puts the wrist at rest so that you don't move it as much, and then it has time to relax a bit. You might get some simple medication for it, and then it will get better.
Mhm.
So that's what you would get typically, and rest as a main prescription. Um, my personal motivation from a physio perspective would be that there isn't enough communication between esports and healthcare.
Mhm.
So the typical advice you would get as a gamer when you go to see a doctor would be, just don't play that much video games, or find a hobby, or do some stretches, or go outside. However, we don't say the same to someone who is a programmer, for example. Like, how do you
True.
say a programmer? Don't use a computer as much. That's not going to happen. It's your job. So if you're an esports player, that is your job. So we can do what we do with everyone else. We assess, we apply intervention, we educate, rehabilitate, and back to high performance to make sure that the player is performing and that there will be the steps for the future prevention, which is ideal. So the way I got my data was with Tikka Esports. They recorded mouse hand movement from Mouseotron software, and it was matched with a symptoms diary in which, well, you can see here basically what's the info that I asked. So I asked for all the symptoms: numbness, burning, tingling, pain in both mouse and keyboard hand, as well as what games they played the most, and the performance that they felt like. Did they feel bad that day or did they do really good? And this is how the Mouseotron measurements look like in green. So it shows in how many hours were played and how many kilometers were passed physically with the mouse. So it collects the data from the mouse itself, not from the cursor. So that is that, and the results. In short, longer time playing was not a risk factor for carpal tunnel syndrome. However, the burning sensation that the players reported had increased reporting with longer mouse distance travel, which was also found that the player performance decreased. So in a bit more simple words, the longer you play, in these cases would mean that you would have longer distance traveled. For example, that is why I mentioned that the game matters. The players recorded from PUBG and CSGO, which are first-person shooters, you would have a very low mouse sensitivity. That means you need to move your hand a lot more. That means more distance traveled. So we don't know yet if this is across the board applicable, because this is only the first research to go into that. I would love to see more different genres that are checked, because you would have a completely different usage in MOBAs or strategy games where there might be a lot more keyboard use. But for this particular study, I would definitely like to see it considered a bit more in terms of do FPS games present a higher risk because of that lower mouse sensitivity, because that would force you to travel a lot more with the mouse. And as the travel increased, so did the burning sensation, and then it was perceived that the performance dropped. So that would be an area to really affect, like, why is it that way? What can we do about it? Would breaks help? At what point is a good time to get the optimal performance, then get a bit of break, then the symptoms would disappear, and then get back to playing? We don't know yet. So that was just a first look into what could be potentially a risk factor. But that was what my thesis was about. It was great fun to do it. And I'm very lucky that I picked esports last year, because that was one of the possible industries that didn't require any physical interaction. Like I could get all the data online from my players. So I managed to complete it on time. The full link to it, it's a 40-page document. If you're really interested of reading it, it's not that interesting, I can guarantee you. But if you really want to, you can search my name on Theseus, where all of the university theses are uploaded. So you can find it there, or just by the title, because there isn't a second one like it. So it's not difficult to find.
Sure, we can we can find it ourselves, and we can put it in the thanking email that we send to all our viewers. So we can definitely send them a link to your thesis, and whoever is interested, they can take a look at it.
Yes.
But I would say that's a pretty nice topic to pick up, and really good job on that, first of all. And carpal tunnel syndrome, it's like the most basic yet one of the most important things you can talk about in terms of this topic about physical health, because yeah, it's such a big, like, I would say first time I heard about it was, I think I was in seventh class, and they were teaching us about occupational hazards of tennis and office jobs. And being a gamer myself, over the time you think about it, like yeah, like esport players have to spend about 8 hours just practicing every day. Like, it's not that they're playing for fun anymore; they're practicing at their skill and like what they earn from. So it's pretty nice topic and a good, I would say, good field of research.
Yeah.
This way.
That is not to say that the gaming does cause carpal tunnel syndrome. That is not the case. I
Uh-huh.
didn't find any of those. The results only show that there is a reason to think about preventative measures because, again, symptoms of burning now can
Uh-huh.
develop in the future into something else. So, showing that there is a connection between the movement that you do during gaming and the stress that your hand would be under.
Mm-hmm.
It is enough to be worth considering for establishing preventative measures now, um, before it gets too late, because that is also the other issue, that carpal tunnel syndrome has a very short period of um, conservative treatment. We're talking
Mm-hmm.
something like 0 to 6 months, after which, if the symptoms are severe enough, then it's basically only surgery that can help.
Mm-hmm.
So, noticing the symptoms early and taking the time to really focus on that and help yourself
Mm-hmm.
is the way to go to avoid any kind of future absences.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I agree. In that case, I don't know too much technical things, but because I'm not a doctor myself. But I would totally agree, and we actually need more of these kind of researches in this field, because there is so much uncharted. I would say it's a totally uncharted territory, and like if you think about it, then there's a lot of uh, rumors, or like, how, I don't know, like myths. I would say it's like, don't look at the screen too much. It's bad for your eyesight. I mean, yeah, it is bad for the eyesight. It's proven, but still, we gotta do something about it, because it, like, screens are a part of life these days, and it's not just, it's they're pretty inevitable. So I would say it's a good start, and I think it's a good motivation for anyone who is looking forward to do something or be involved in this subject, and they can take a look at other, or they can help you with your research that as well, but they can also take a look at other topics that there are. And thanks a lot for sharing that with us. I have, like, a few questions for you, and
Yep.
that I prepared, and we also have some good commenting happening in the live channel. First of all, there is one of our viewer who's saying that your thesis is actually interesting and I shouldn't let you lie. So it was a good read, as they're suggesting.
Thank
And
you. Thank you.
another one of our uh, audience says that when I had first beat wellness measurements, I did an empirical test with myself, played Overwatch on PS4 and on PC. On PC, the graph was only red, bad stress, and on PS4, it was all recovering.
Nice. That is very interesting as well. And I do think that there is a difference between platforms because the play style is definitely different. But again, we would need a lot more research into pretty much every game genre on every single platform.
Mhm.
And of course, Prakar, you said it really nicely. Like, don't look at the screen because your eyes are going to go bad. We kind of know it, but do we really know it? Because the research, and that was also the case with carpal tunnel syndrome, research has been done from the 90s,
Mhm.
but what use was then and what use is now regarding computers and screens, and how much technology has advanced in
Yeah.
both computer build and the screen materials. It's it's very it's a very slippery slope from there. Like, we
True.
need ideally every 5 years new research on everything, which is not humanly possible. But um, it is always good to take it with a grain of salt, not as absolute truth, just as this is possible. Maybe we need to learn more about it.
Yeah, like I was gonna mention it as well, that probably it also depends, like in the case of carpal tunnel syndrome that you mentioned, that it depends on the game that you're playing. But I would say that, for example, it's completely different to play. For CS:GO, you cannot play on a platform like PlayStation. But I think, for example, PUBG, there are many players who are playing it on their mobile, or for example, on their PlayStations or Xbox and different consoles. And it's not like they don't have problems, but I think it's completely different story for them, which could be researched on and which can be like then in the future solved. So yeah, I like, nice comment in the section. We have a pretty good chat actually.
Oh, I wish I could see it.
Me too. But Yade is helping us with that, so thanks a lot, Yade, for
Thank
that.
you.
I have a question for you. So we talked all about physiotherapy and what it is. I want to know from you, what is the most fun part about this job that you like?
I think every day can be different,
Uh
and
huh.
you have relatively big freedom as to what you can do because every person is different.
Hmm.
So there's a lot of improvising on the spot. Um, of course, we use evidence-based treatments, but when you're, for example, helping somebody uh, to get back to walking, you're not just limited to your office or the corridor in the hospital ward. You can take them outside if they like to be outside, or in a swimming pool if they prefer water therapy and if it's available facility. So having the freedom to have fun, essentially, that is a big part of how I personally like to do physiotherapy. I like to have fun.
Hmm.
I like to gamify it because it makes my day nicer, that I
Uh
don't
huh.
need to do the same thing every day,
Yeah.
and it makes it fun for the clients or the patients. And when you have fun, I have at least noticed that everything goes a bit better. The motivation is a bit higher, and you still get to do what you have to do. It just doesn't have to be boring, even if you're in a hospital. It
Yeah.
doesn't mean you're forbidden from having fun.
Hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. Like anything that you can do to make it non-monotonous, well, it's fun. It's other one that I have, like because of this webinar series, we try to tell our audience about different opportunities that exists in the field of gaming and esports itself. And since this is a very good and useful field, for example, be health and being a physiotherapist in this field, I want to know some main skills that are required for this position in the industry. And are there any technical aspects or knowledge one needs to know? And does language play any part?
Uh, I don't personally think that language plays a big part because if you're playing online games, you probably speak English. Like, that's
Uh huh.
just that's kind of how it goes.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's a major one necessarily, not even in Finland. However, I think the biggest factor would be um, being able to work remotely, because our profession is very much hands-on, and that has been traditionally how it is. But being able to do virtual consultations or virtual evaluations through web camera, it takes some practice,
Mhm.
because it's not the same as having the client next to you. So I think that would be the one technical aspect that, if you're not comfortable with doing that, it would be very difficult,
Mhm.
unless you live in a big esports hub like LA, where you can just have your teams right next door. But other than that, I think in general, all healthcare professionals are very much needed in esports. We see a lot of teams adopting all kinds of nutritionists and chefs and exercise physiologists or sports sciences people
Mm-hmm.
into their ranks, because we are getting to the point where we know that physical activity can help gaming performance. So it's now trying to get those professionals in. Mental coaching, it has been a big one since the beginning, pretty much, of esports. That's
Mm-hmm.
usually the one person that every team gets once they can afford to get somebody in. But now we see a lot of sports psychologists get involved, and just traditional healthcare based psychologists, doctors, and of course, physiotherapists.
Mm-hmm. And like one more thing that came into my mind, like I'm wearing this jersey. I support my favorite football team, Real Madrid. And any match that I've watched, it's like when people get injured, I'm talking about it because it's also a team sport, like you mentioned in the beginning of the webinar. So just bear with me one moment, everybody. So when I watch football, there are injuries happening all the time in it, and there's always a team of medical professionals who are there to help these players. At least that's what I can see. But I also know that these professional teams, they have uh, quite good infrastructure on these health um, facilities. For example, they have proper hospitals and stuff. And when a player is injured, they have different plans and schedules for that, etc., etc. Do you think like there's always this ongoing battle between traditional sports and esports? But is there something that we can learn in this field from traditional sports?
I think
What is your
esports can learn a lot from traditional sports. I think your example is fantastic. Football is probably, or soccer, if we have some people from the US, it is one of the most well established structures in terms of long term athlete development from childhood. Uh, I don't know for sure if it's only in Germany or everywhere else where they have those very well established football teams, but um, you would get uh, kids from a very young age that go and train in those essentially boarding schools for sports, but they would have their training schedule and they would have their study schedule. So there is no compromise between education and practicing your skill in the sport that you are good at. You have a lot of professionals that are focused on pediatric development, pediatric nutrition, uh, everything revolving around the appropriate age group that we're talking about. And then as the kids get older, you have the semi-pro, so that would be like teenager or youth leagues, and then you would go into pro after 18. I would love to see that kind of system as well in esports, because we have, in some cases, 6-year-olds on pro level, which professionally cannot agree with. Personally, I think it's fun, but of course, we have to know what is the long-term effect of that going to be. But I would love to see a lot of strategies being revolving around the early development. Astralis is a really good example as a team, as well as Excel in the UK, that they have very large rosters. They have a lot of multi-professional teams going on. Like I mentioned, nutritionists and chefs and physios and psychologists and so on. Of course, it needs the team to be at a certain level to be able to afford that. But I think in a lot of teams, the priority needs to be first on
the
we
health?
care about our players, and from there it can be found a way to adapt that, because if your players are well, they will perform and they will continue with you. So there won't be the issue of very frequent roster changes, which is the current problem that we see. Players leave after 4 months, which is like every 4 months you need to get a new player. Then you need to readjust the team dynamics. Then you need to educate everybody in how everything
Mhm.
works. They might not click with each other and so on. it can be nice. I don't know for sure, but I would imagine that it's not the greatest experience. You cannot build a team if players are changing all the time.
True.
And of course, having the extra players, I think Astralis has like 11 or 12 people rosters. So having the extra people for when one player gets some symptoms or just have an off day or gets the flu or whatever, you can immediately get them into some kind of care, professional care.
Mhm.
And then there's another guy to step in for a couple matches that that would perform as good or almost as good. That will be enough.
Like a substitute.
Yeah,
Yeah.
basically.
Or yeah, that's good points that you mentioned. Actually, I didn't think of it in that way, but yeah, it could only a professional can talk more about it.
You see, David Beckham step wrong on the field. He goes right to his physio, and then somebody else steps in. He might not be another David Beckham, but he
Yeah.
will do almost as good job to ensure that the team keeps on playing. And then David Beckham will get his care, and he will be again the superstar player for the next game, which is who most of the people would want to see that support that team.
True.
So that's kind of what we would want to see, that we want to make sure the players play for as long as possible on the highest level that they want to be on.
Yeah, that's true. Another question is that there are many health rumors or myths associated with gaming. Like some of them you mentioned when you go to a therapist and they are telling you that don't go out more, do stretching and other things. What do you think that how awareness is the only way we can fix this problem? That I believe. How important is awareing people, and not just the gamers, but also the adult audience related to the gamers, for example, their parents? Do you think what can we do for that?
I think it is a very important part of the dialogue, as a lot of the players would be on the younger side, so the parents will be very, very much part of it. And from my clinical experience, most parents have absolutely no clue what their kids do and why they play. They just see it as a bad thing. Then you have the healthcare professionals that, not that they're bad professionals, but they just don't know what games are. So they go based off whatever knowledge is publicly available to them. Again, evidence-based. So if the knowledge says that, or if the research says that, yeah, games are bad for you, then of course that would be the dialogue that they'll be leading. And it brings a lot of blaming the games, blaming the phones, blaming the computers, blaming absolutely everything else. And there is really much need to just put everybody on the same table and talk to them. And the way I like to explain it, at least for when esports and gaming in teams is concerned, is that parents would usually be very distraught that my kid spends X amount of hours playing only games, and they don't really understand it and they wanted to stop. But when you explain it to them that, okay, do you know what he's playing or she's playing? The parent will say, no, I don't play video games, so I don't know. It's like, okay, you also take your kid to hockey practice. Do you play hockey yourself? And they'll be like, no. It's like, yes, but you go every time your kid goes to hockey practice now, don't you? And you pay really good money to get a very good coach for your kid. And then it would start to kind of click a little bit. It's like, actually, yes. So it's like, okay, how can we bring that understanding to also esports? And in Australia, they've done a really good job at it. They're starting to organize on a school level these kind of extracurriculum activities for kids, because kids will go home and play games anyway. So might as well keep them in school. Put a teacher that understands games and that likes to play to be as a coach, because they are also educated in teaching. So they can provide some team building. They can just be generally giving breaks, giving advice, and so on. And at the end of the year, the kids would have a tournament, inter-school tournament, very small event, but then they would invite all the parents to it. And then you see how a parent goes from not knowing what games their kids play, not caring about it, thinking is just nothing, is waste of time. They would go towards the points like, yes, that is my kid. Yes, the team is winning.
Yeah.
And then they will get super involved in it. And that is the moment I think that this is the kind of energy that we need for a lot of parents to understand. Like, we don't need every parent to become a gamer, but just as a parent would be involved in their child's music lessons, sports lessons, or something else, why can't, if the child wants to get better at Fortnite, why can't you get them a Fortnite coach? There's
True.
plenty of pro players that are offering that. So it's the conversation would be a way to kind of diminish the stigma that goes
Uh-huh.
around it. And the more healthcare professionals know, they can better educate the parents about what is actually good for games and what is a bad kind of experience. Because, of course, there are negatives as well. So that has to be addressed. You can't have somebody play for 6-8 hours a day when they need to get up for school,
True.
but have to find the middle ground.
I agree with all the points that you mentioned, even though some of them were pretty new for me as well, but they actually offer solutions for what I considered a problem, and I think most of the people will agree with me. So thanks a lot again for sharing that with us, because a professional's advice or an expert's advice is what actually can bring some changes in this field. And we have, like, I would like to thank you for being with us on this episode, and we have some commenting going on in our live chat, in which I'm guessing this is Antti, the project manager of SK, and he's thanking you a lot for the webinar. He said it was awesome to listen to it, and we should definitely invite you to host some workshops for the SK network in the future.
Thank you for having me, and thank you especially Antti, because most people don't know, but he was one of the first people I ever contacted when I was starting to kind of look into my topic. So having that support has been great. So thank you a lot.
And also, there is one more viewer, and they thank you on the behalf of Female Gaming Finland for bringing up such an important topic. And as a fellow physio, exercise physiologist, gaming enthusiast, they want to keep in touch. So I would just like to send their warm regards to you.
Thank
and
you. Thank you.
and on that note, I would like to conclude the webinar. We had a great episode, Violeta, and I'm gonna share my screen quickly. So I hope you all enjoyed our episode, and you should definitely look forward for more upcoming ones, because we do everything as I mentioned before, and we have some interesting topics coming up ahead, which have to do with professional playing, role of manager, psychological side of esports, and if you want to watch some episodes that we have talked about before, topics including game design, event organizing, streaming, esports in general, like the ones in gray on my screen. You can check it out on our YouTube pages or from the links in our Facebook page and enjoy them. For more information, check out our main page, which has the link on your screen right now. And to join our Evergreen network, in which we discuss different topics, play together, have tournaments, follow us on Facebook, join us on our Discord channel and Twitter. With that, I would like to thank everybody for joining and see you next time. Bye bye.